Hello everyone, welcome back to my lesson. Today we're focusing on lesson number 2, grade 11, trigonometric functions. So obviously now um, we are basically trying to understand the effects of P, the horizontal shift. What happens if the graph is being shifted left or right? Um, at this stage, we know how to draw the graph of sine x, y equals to cos x, right? But now what happens if now we start to introduce the horizontal shift? What happens to the equation? Say for an example, for argument's sake now they give you y equals to sine x, sorry, let's use this, x plus p. Now they are adding p degrees. Y equals to cos x plus p degrees. Or they can even say y equals to tan x plus p degrees. What do they mean by this? So basically they're simply saying, in this case, the graph is being shifted to the left. So when they add, then which means the graph is being shifted to the left. So this will mean left. So when they subtract, it means right. Yeah? Where maybe they can give you something like this, x minus p. Then this one here will be for our right. So the graph is being shifted to the right from the standard graph of y equals to sine x. This is our standard graph without any shifts. As soon as there's a horizontal shift, then you'll see where they just add p or subtract p, right? Now let's try and maybe move to example number 1. Let's move to example number 1. Sorry. Example number 1. Now they're saying sketch the graph of y equals to sine x plus 30. Now there's a horizontal shift here. They've added 30, which means now the graph has been shifted 30 units. Sorry, has been shifted 30 degrees to what? The left, right? And then now they've decided to restrict us to say x is an element of negative 30 degrees is to 300 degrees. Now, obviously, we need to have new points because of our horizontal shift. So let me try and bring the table, which is actually related to this, to this. So here's the table. Here's our table now. We choose that we are having the original point. Here's the original point at 0 and 0. So now these are our points, né? So for every point you subtract 30 to the left. You subtract 30, 30, 30, and 30. Now because this is horizontal, which means you only focus on x. You subtract only on x. So 0, x was 0. Now we say 0 minus 30. We get minus 30 there, 90. You get 60, 150, 240, and 330. Right? And then now you have your new point now. Now we are having the new points. So now we just need to draw based on these new points. We're drawing the graph now based on these new points. So now let's try and sketch our graph. Okay, you'll have your negative 30 there, negative 0,5, negative 1, 0,5, and 1. This is your y and your x. So the point here would be our 60. You have 60, 150, 240, and 330. We are following the new point, right? So our first point there is at negative 30 and 1. Sorry, man, negative 30 and 0. It's negative 30 and 0. So we have a point there. The next one, 60 is to 1. 60 is to 1, somewhere there. And then 150 is to 0. 240 is to negative 1. And then 330 is to 0. Now let's join the points. And then here's our graph. So our graph, originally it was at 0, but now it went left 30 degrees. It's being shifted 30 degrees to the left, right? So I believe that we are still following and it makes sense. So there's nothing major. There's people who know how to draw this graph using a calculator. I'll also create a lesson whereby I will show you how to draw the graph using a calculator. For now, we're just using the table method. So this is just example 1. Now let's move to example 2. Again, for example 2, we'll follow our table, the table method to get the new point, right, from the original point. So now they've added 60 and then they've also added 45 for tan, right? So we have to subtract 60 in our cost graph and subtract 45 in our tan graph. And you'll end up having something like this for your table. So for your table, you will have y equals to cos x plus 60. Now we subtract 60 and then you get your new points there, right? And then we subtract 45 again, we subtract 45 in every point, even the asymptotes, to obtain the new point. So here, usually our asymptote is at 90, but now you subtract 90, you subtract 45 from 90, and then you get 45. Same applies to 270, and then we get 225. And then we start drawing our graph, right? How to draw the graph now? How do we draw the graph now? So it's not a problem as well. We can simply draw the graph. Let's start with the cost graph. Cost graph. So it starts at negative 60. We'll start at negative 60. Okay, let's have 0,5 and 1. Negative 0,5 and negative 1. Okay, at 45, we have our asymptote 135 there, 225, and we have our 225, and then 315. So you have your first asymptote there at 45, second one at 225, because we've subtracted 45 from 90 and 270. And then now we managed to get new asymptotes, which they are at 225 and 45, right? So the point for, okay, this is the tan graph, ne? Let me just continue with the tan graph. It's fine. Let me just continue with the tan graph. It's okay. And then I'll just draw the course after. I'll just draw the course after. Because I was now focusing on the table of tan, which is this one. So let's have minus 45 there, ne? And then now 45, we have a 0. 135, there's a 0. 315, there's a 0. Now, since the sign of tan is positive, so which means the graph will have to go up. Start by increasing at 135, goes down alternatively, and up again and down, right? And then, as from here, now you can just label your point. Here you have your 135 is to 0, 215 is to 0, and then negative 45 is to 0 here. So this is the graph of tan x plus 45. Now let's draw the cost graph. Let's draw the cost graph. So for the cost graph, again, you will have so this is negative 60, 30, 120, 210, and 200, right? We have 0, 0.5 and your 1. And then here you have your negative 0, 0.5 and the negative 1. So for minus 60, you have positive 1 passes here. And then for 30, you have a 0. And then for 120, we have negative 1. 210, 0. And then 300, you have 1 again. Join the points. Now we're joining the points. And then here's our graph. Here's our graph where there's a shift now, horizontal, x plus 60 degrees. So obviously now the graph was supposed to be at 0, but now it went that side. Now we are having negative 60 degrees because of the horizontal shift. Perfect. Now let's move to the change in period. The change in period. So for the change in period, on our previous video, I've explained the effects of K, which is the change in period, the effects of K. How does K affect our graph, right? So a change in period stretches or compresses the graph horizontal. It can either stretch or compress the graph, right? And you might end up having your equation in the form of y equals to sine, and then the value of k there. Let's introduce our k there. We have your k x. Or we can have y is equals to cos, here's your k there, and x. So they're introducing the k there in front of the angle. Now, as I've explained before, I said if k is between 0 and 1, then the graph is stretched. The period will increase. So we are actually focusing, we are actually now having the value of k as a fraction, right? And then if k is greater than 1, the graph is compressed and the period decreases. Obviously, we can have maybe 2, 3, 7, etc., etc. Right? Let's try and see if we can maybe have an example related to this. Let me try and find the example quickly for you guys. Yeah, here's example 1. So on our example 1, they're saying sketch the graph of y equals to sine 2x. We're sketching the graph of sine 2x where x is an element of negative 360 is to 360. So the first thing that you need to do, the new period is equals to the period of a sine graph is 360. So we divide the new period, we divide the old period, which is the standard period, by the value of k. And the value of k there is 2. So we divide the period by 2, and then we get 180. So for every 180, you will get a complete cycle, right? Now let me draw the graph so that I can show you what do I mean by that. What do I mean by that? Okay. You have your negative 360. To 70, negative 180, negative 90, 90, 180, 270, and 360. Okay, let me add these because they're important. Okay, y values, you have your 1 there and your negative 1. Y values and x axis, né? So now, in order to sketch the graph, we take every key value intercept, we multiply it by 2, right? You multiply it by 2. Perfect. And then after multiplying by 2, you'll get new points, or rather new values. So at negative 360, you have a 0. You have 1 there between 270 and 360. And then 0 at negative 270. Negative 1 between there. 0, 1. Yeah. And then now we can draw the graph. We're just joining the points. Just joining the points. Perfect. So now I want to emphasize something. You can see the period changed from 360 to 180, right? Now, what does that mean? Let me show you in our graph. So here's our graph. So this is the complete cycle. From 0 to 180, you get a complete cycle, which shows that the period now changed from 360 to 108. So now we have the complete cycle from 0 to 180, you get a complete graph, a complete cycle. Again, here, you get another complete cycle. So every 180, there's a complete cycle, complete cycle, complete cycle, just like that. So I believe that we understand that part, how K affected the period of the graph, right? Mm, let's try and draw another graph. Y equals to cos 1 over 2x. Cos 1 over 2x, ne? So for the new period, again, new period, we need to say 360 divided by the value of k, that's half, 1 over 2. So you'll have your what? Your 720 degrees. Now, so you can only get a complete cycle after 720, right? So in order to sketch the graph now, take every value, x-intercept, the intercept and the turning point, divide it by the x-coordinate. Now we divide the x-coordinate by half. So now we're dividing all the x-coordinate by half, right? Same as multiplying it by 2. And you will end up having new points. Now you'll end up having new points and then you start drawing your graph. So I just want to show you how our graph will look like. How our graph will look like. Okay, sorry about that. Let me do this. Let me try and that's it. This is the perfect one. This is the perfect one. And then from here, we have your negative 360. 270, negative 180, and negative 90. Here you have your 90, 180, 270, and 360. And then there's negative 1 there and positive 1. For negative 1, it's negative 360, 180, there's 0, 1, 0 there, 180, 0, and then 360, negative 1. And then we have to join the graph. And then you'll have something like this. So now this is our new graph, whereby now the period has been affected. It's been affected, right? Guys, I will come with new videos. I'll come with more videos, actually. I will come with more videos based on this. So now we've come to the end of our lesson. Thank you so much for watching my videos. Bye.